Everyone creates art for different reasons. Some may be doing it as a professional job, as a passion project, as a hobby, or maybe even as a therapeutic activity. Art is made by a diverse kind of people, and why they make it varies. Yet I would wager that in many of them is a reflection of their lives. Whether it's big, small, or the opposite of what they make, art could serve as a mirror, and that might be a key to understanding oneself better. Like how when you're feeling happy, the way you express art might be vibrant and cheerful, or it could be the opposite. Or when you especially experience something in life, it gets incorporated into the art you make. Like if you had an adventure with friends, you might write a story about an adventuring party, or perhaps you experience something traumatic. Then you create art that copes with that trauma and aids in the healing of it. How art reflects your life comes in many shapes and forms, and most likely, yours might differ from mine. In my case, when I was a kid, I was mostly alone, and tragically, I am alone again even after the last-ditch effort I put into making friends in college. In my current solitude though, I have realized that the majority of my life has been spent alone, though most of the time painting or drawing, thankfully. While I don't regret making art at all, I feel as though I should have spent more time with my friends and or family. Because my art, my comics for example, are rooted from my own life experiences, particularly my experiences with friends, my adventures in the different cities I traveled, and the people I've met along the way. The very stories I tell in my original drawings, paintings, and comics all stem and are founded upon life experiences. And this was around post-2019 to 2020 where I began implementing them, which made my works more genuine rather than merely derivative. Because when I was in elementary to junior high school, I didn't talk much. I didn't spend my time with others unless invited, and many times I would decline. In fact, I was surfing the internet during its early days as a kid, just playing flash games and watching YouTube when I wasn't at school or doing my art. My art, on the other hand, at that time was reflective of my loneliness and isolation because I kept it to myself. My stories, they were devoid of meaning, just copies and derivatives of what I found online. I drew clothing, human anatomy, armor, animals, and many other things without reference because I was ignorant, and no one told me since no one was there. With no one there, I had no critics, which inevitably led to no improvement in my art, which is why when I look back, the majority of my childhood art was stagnant and the same for more than half a decade. So, in a disturbing revelation, I've spent almost my entire life lurking around the internet, then drawing by myself all alone and wasn't experiencing life for real most of the time, without anyone to exchange words with, nor anyone to criticize me. This came at a breaking point around 2020 due to the pandemic, where I experienced being isolated for real, and began to accept the truth that, the YouTubers I've been watching since childhood have no idea who I am. They may be a friend to me, but not I to them, because in reality, I'm just a number to these people. So is the tragedy of parasocial relationships. Since before the pandemic, although I spent my time almost all alone, I was always free to go out and I rarely did from time to time, hence I had some memories of adventures, partying, and conversations with friends. But they are few and far in between. When I say rare moments, I mean it in the most literal sense. Although, arguably it makes it easier to remember my memories when there's not much there, which is a tad bit sad, but I must make do. All this living a lie on the internet and beginning to appreciate my real-life friends made me take action. Especially when 2022 came around, I began making the effort of talking to people, hanging out, participating in activities, as much as I could. What I didn't do in my 4 years of college, I did in a span of a few months leading up to graduation. And so tragically, the moment I was making friends in college was also the moment I was separated from them. And I did try to do that again when I was taking the board exams, well, studying for the board exams specifically, but that was a short-lived experience. When I got home from graduation, settling back into my house where I used to be alone and isolated, my art once again kind of became stagnated. Everything was bland, safe, and secure, which reflected on my digital paintings at that time. I noticed that the best art that I made were the ones where I was in a rough place, like in a dingy dorm room where I made my giant treehouse painting, in an underground apartment where I made a very grandiose self-portrait, or during the pandemic where I just had a burst of splash art I made in sequence. A great example of this was right after graduating college. Again, when I got back home, I was pumped, excited, because for a couple of months, I had freedom before studying for the boards. I expected that in these 2 months I would bust out amazing paintings, now that I wasn't in school anymore and wasn't studying. But my art just came out bland, one after the other. This baffled me, because there was no school, there was nothing to worry about, yet my outputs weren't great. But when I went back to study for the board exams outside my home, in another apartment where I was once again in a place of scarcity, I made a painting that I would consider one of my best, which was the Imperial Knights splash art that I made where I solved a problem in dealing with complex big paintings. It was confusing, because back in the pandemic as well was also when my skill in art spiked up, in my digital art, my watercolor art, and in my comics. In fact, 2020 to 2021 were both turbulent years in my life. So many problems, so many issues with school, stress, anxiety, and insomnia. Yet it was also when I learned to muscle through my comics, advance in digital painting, and hone my watercolor art. I have observed that in both times of turbulence and joy spent with other people was when my art and stories shined. And it's when everything's safe and sound or dull and boring that my art somewhat declines or stagnates. When there's no pressure or no energy, I also have no will and no drive to pursue. Creating art is essentially an expression of emotion, that we kind of know. When you feel isolated or alone in one way or another, that can also reflect on your art. Like in my case, because I was alone and there was no one to criticize me, my art showed stagnation, lack of improvement, and a lack of understanding the wider world. When your life is bland, safe, and you've got nothing better to do, you sort of don't want to do anything else. Just like when I was finally free from responsibilities and pressure, my art dipped for a moment. But when I was dealing with life, and I set myself a challenge like in 2019 where I first began making my comics, my art over time got refined and improved because I set out a goal. When life got turbulent, time was of the essence, and so I learned to manage my time, making my art quality not necessarily by getting faster, but by creating a process of painting that accommodates my time for studying or working. It's when problems and challenges appear in your life that breeds creativity and innovation into the craft that you're doing for some reason. When life challenges you, or if you challenge yourself, you find a way to solve problems and face those challenges. Whether that challenge is enjoyable, like planning to go out with friends or aspiring to a higher standard of art, or that challenge is stressful or worrying, like having less time because of school and work, or dealing with emotional turmoil, you find a way to embrace it or work around it, respectively. Art is like a mirror of what's happening or how you deal with life currently. And from my experience, you can use this to find out more about yourself and see where it might lead you. Maybe you find yourself at a high point and you've got to take advantage of the situation, or you may realize that you're actually down on your luck and you should ask for help. It's something to think about as an artist, or just in general as a creative. Beyond visual art, be it music, writing, or tinkering, the craft you produce could well in fact show you how you really feel, be it in a very obvious way, like making a direct comic about your situation, Something as cryptic, like noticing a lack of enthusiasm or drive when crafting your piece. Or maybe you express the opposite, such as when you're in a bad mood, you make a joyful painting. Art can be more than just pretty pictures that you make or unintelligible scramblings on canvas. It is a mirror, maybe more so a window to a person's soul, sort of like the eyes. Be it congruent or opposite in expression, it tells us something about another person, and I observe from others, like my friends who do art, that give me an idea of what they're going through, or an interesting dynamic in personality, like the author Junji Ito, who is a horror manga artist, who is very contrast to his works since he presents himself as this kind gentleman. Yet his manga is one of the most terrifying things ever created on this earth. In any case, I hope this little essay was something that could be relatable to others, or at the very least somewhat of interest. So that's about it for now, and if you're pursuing grand ambitions, don't let anyone stop you. Until then, see you.